During World War I, Romania fought against the Central Powers, but were forced to sue for peace in May 1918. But despite being devastated by the war, and facing a new threat to the east in Bolshevik Russia, they entered the war in November to exploit the Central Powers' now inevitable defeat. Meanwhile, in late October in Hungary, soldiers and citizens seized the government offices in Budapest. As part of the Astra Revolution, Mihaly Karolyi took over the now independent nation and signed an armistice with the advancing Allies, agreeing to hand over a great deal of land and get rid of the nation's army. This obviously made him unpopular, and he resigned in early 1919. And in the ensuing chaos, the well-organized communist and industrial workers, led by Bela Kun, took over. But the Allies were moving quickly towards Hungary's new borders, and the Romanians had plans on removing Bela Kun from power to stop them being surrounded by two communist nations. The victorious Allies, however, in particular, America, were unwilling to start another war and potentially get the Soviets involved, so they offered terms to Communist Hungary. They would agree to recognize the communist government in exchange for territorial concessions. However, Bela Kun had promised to return the lost land, so this was rejected, giving the remaining a cause for war. But thousands of returning troops and unemployed people in Hungary allowed Kun to create an army of tens of thousands in a short space of time, and he decided to strike first in mid-April. But the Romanians held the line, counterattacked a few days later, and pushed towards the Tisa River. The great powers, who were still meeting at the Paris Peace Conference, called on the Romanians to halt their advance, allowing Kun to sue for peace, in exchange for finally recognizing the Allied territorial gains. Meanwhile, as all this was going on, Bessarabia officially left Russia and voted to join Romania. So the Bolsheviks began launching further incursions into Bessarabia, but thanks to foreign regiments and the ongoing Russian Civil War, the full-scale invasion didn't take place. And in Hungary, after failing to reclaim lost territory from Romania, Kun turned his attention to Czechoslovakia. He enlisted even more men into his army and attacked in May, capturing towns like Košice and Prešov. However, he created a puppet state, the Slovak Soviet Republic, angering many nationalists who wanted to see it become Hungarian again. Thus, the Serbians and French threatened to strike Hungary if they continued their advance. So in late June, Kun signed an armistice with the Czechoslovaks and retreated. In Budapest, however, there was a failed anti-communist coup, and Kun responded to it brutally by repressing all anti-communist activity. So some of the anti-communists, including Admiral Horthy, formed a new government in the south and began raising an army to take power. Plus, Bela Kun refused to demobilize, so the Romanians refused to pull back to their old borders. So the Hungarians decided to force them back and attacked. In mid-July, 50,000 men assaulted across the entire front, and by the 21st, they had captured some small towns like Rakimas. But these towns changed hands a couple of times over the next few days. There was no large-scale communist insurrection as they had hoped for, and the Soviet Union did not get involved, so they made no ground, and on the 24th, the Romanians counted and crossed the Tisa River. In late July, as the Hungarian army fell apart, Bela Kun fled, and a trade unionist named Pedal took over, as the Romanians occupied Budapest on the 4th. Meanwhile, Horthy's army grew thanks to thousands of military desertions, but it seemed like the Allies would recognize Padel's government. So on the 6th, the right-wing anti-government White House Comrades Association staged a coup and took power. Horthy's army, however, contained many ultranationalists who carried out many atrocities against communists and Jews. During the White Terror, the new government tried to make Archduke Joseph August of Austria leader, but the Allies did not support Habsburg returning to rule. So power shifted hands a couple times before Horthy took over. In early 1920, shortly before the Allies got the Romanians to leave the country, but Hungary had to pay reparations, and the Romanians took a large amount of industrial, military, and even civilian goods back with them. And the Treaty of Trianon reduced Hungary's borders even more, and many Hungarians were left in a foreign country. So Horthy spent his rule, which lasted until World War II, trying to overturn this treaty, but political and economical instability prevented him from doing so.